The telegram arrived at the ranch on a Tuesday afternoon in September 1878, announcing that Winifred Jensen would be delayed by 2 weeks due to unforeseen circumstances. And Brennan Masters felt his stomach twist with worry as he read those carefully chosen words that told him nothing and everything at once. He stood on the wooden porch of his ranch house outside Hays City, Kansas, the telegram crumpling slightly in his calloused hands as prairie wind whipped across the open land. At 26, Brennan had built a decent life for himself. 300 acres of good grazing land, a sturdy house, and enough cattle to ensure a comfortable future. What he did not have was a wife, and after 2 years of loneliness following his mother's passing, he had finally worked up the courage to respond to an advertisement in the matrimonial news. Winifred Jensen had written him letters for 6 months. Her penmanship was beautiful, her words thoughtful and kind. She was 23, orphaned and working as a seamstress in St. Louis, Missouri. She wrote about her love of reading, her skill with a needle, and her dreams of a simpler life away from the crowded city. Brennan had sent her money for the train journey, and she was supposed to arrive today. The delay troubled him. Unforeseen circumstances could mean anything. 2 weeks crawled by with agonizing slowness. Brennan threw himself into work, mending fences, checking on the herd, and trying not to imagine all the terrible possibilities. His ranch hand, an older fellow named Dutch, noticed his boss's distraction but wisely kept his thoughts to himself. When the revised arrival date finally came, Brennan rode into Hays City well before dawn. The town was just beginning to stir, smoke rising from chimneys, the saloon still quiet from the previous night's activities. He positioned himself on the train platform an hour before the scheduled arrival, his best hat in his hands, his shirt freshly laundered. The train whistle pierced the morning air at exactly 8 o'clock. Brennan's heart hammered against his ribs as the locomotive hissed to a stop, releasing great clouds of steam. Passengers began to disembark, families reuniting, businessmen striding purposefully toward the town. Brennan searched every face, looking for the woman whose tintype photograph he had studied countless times. Then he saw her, and his breath caught. A conductor was carefully helping someone down from the train, and Brennan caught a glimpse of auburn hair beneath a modest bonnet. But something was wrong. The woman was not stepping down. She was being lowered, and then he saw why. Winifred Jensen was seated in a wheelchair. The conductor maneuvered the chair down a specially positioned ramp, and Brennan found himself moving forward without conscious thought. When he reached her side, those eyes from the photograph, storm gray and beautiful, looked up at him with a mixture of hope and absolute terror. "Mr. Masters." Her voice was soft, musical despite the tremor in it. "Miss Jensen." He knelt down so he could meet her gaze properly. "I am glad you made it safely. I am certain you are surprised." She gripped the arms of the wheelchair, her knuckles white. "The unforeseen circumstances I mentioned in the telegram. I understand completely if you wish to send me back to St. Louis. I have enough money set aside for the return journey. I should have been honest in my letters, but I was a coward, and now I have wasted your time and money, and I apologize most sincerely." The words tumbled out of her in a rush, and Brennan could see she was fighting tears. He glanced at the conductor, who had stepped back politely, then returned his attention to Winifred. "What happened?" he asked gently. She drew a shaky breath. "3 weeks ago, I was crossing the street to mail my final letter to you. A carriage came around the corner too fast. The driver was drunk. I tried to jump out of the way, but I was not quick enough. The wheel struck my legs, and I was dragged several feet before the horses could be stopped." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "The doctor says I may never walk again. The damage to my spine was severe." Brennan absorbed this information, watching her face. Even in her distress, she was lovely. Her skin was pale, suggesting weeks spent indoors recovering, but her features were delicate and expressive. More importantly, her eyes held the same intelligence and kindness that had shone through in her letters. "Did you still want to come?" he asked. The question seemed to surprise her. "I beg your pardon, after the accident. Did you still want to come to Kansas, or did you feel obligated?" Winifred stared at him, confusion flickering across her face. "I wanted to come, very much, but I assumed you would not want a wife who cannot walk, who cannot help with the daily tasks of ranch life, who will be more burden than companion. That is not your decision to make." Brennan stood and looked around the platform. People were starting to notice them, curious glances being cast their way. He made up his mind quickly, as was his nature. "I wrote to you seeking a wife, Miss Jensen. You agreed to come be my wife. Unless you have changed your mind about wanting that, I do not see that anything fundamental has changed." "But I cannot walk," she said, as if he had not understood. "I can walk fine for both of us." He moved behind the wheelchair and began pushing it toward the edge of the platform. "Now, where is your luggage? Mr. Masters, please wait." Winifred twisted in her chair, trying to look back at him. "You do not understand what you are agreeing to. I cannot cook standing at a stove. I cannot clean properly. I cannot tend a garden or feed chickens or do any of the 100 things a ranch wife must do. I will be completely dependent on you for everything." He stopped the chair and came around to face her again, crouching down once more. "Miss Jensen, Winifred, I have read your letters dozens of times. I know your mind and your heart, or at least as much as letters can convey. You are intelligent, kind, and thoughtful. You have a sense of humor and a love of life that came through in every word you wrote. Those qualities do not reside in your legs." A tear slipped down her cheek. "You are being kind. I am being honest." He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and offered it to her. "I will not lie and say this does not change things, because it does, but it does not change my desire for a wife and a partner. If you are willing to give us a chance, then so am I." She took the handkerchief and dabbed at her eyes. "You are certain?" "I am certain." He smiled at her, hoping to ease some of her anxiety. "Now I have a wagon waiting, and it is a 2-hour drive to the ranch. We can get married today at the church in town, or we can wait until you feel more settled. Your choice." Winifred looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for any sign of doubt or pity. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her, because she straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. "Today," she said firmly. "If we are going to do this, then let us do it properly." The reverend at the small church was surprised by the hasty wedding, but asked no questions beyond the necessary legalities. Dutch, who Brennan had sent word to earlier, arrived to serve as a witness along with the reverend's wife. The ceremony was brief and simple, and when Brennan kissed his new bride, he tried to pour all his determination and promise into that gentle touch. Winifred's hands trembled as she gripped his shoulders, but she kissed him back with equal determination. Getting her into the wagon proved to be the first of many challenges. The wheelchair could not make the journey over rough terrain, so Brennan had arranged for it to be stored at the general store in town for whenever they needed to return. He had spread blankets and pillows in the wagon bed to create a comfortable nest for Winifred. "I am going to lift you now," he told her. "If I hurt you at all, you tell me immediately." "You will not hurt me," she said quietly. He slid one arm under her knees and another around her back, lifting her from the wheelchair with surprising ease. She weighed almost nothing, he realized with concern. The accident and its aftermath had clearly taken their toll. She tensed in his arms, and he could feel her embarrassment at being carried. "I have got you," he murmured as he walked to the wagon. "I promise, I have got you." He settled her carefully among the pillows, making sure she was secure and comfortable. She arranged her skirts with practiced efficiency, and he noticed the way her hands shook slightly. "Are you in pain?" he asked. "Some." The journey was difficult. She attempted a smile. "But I have laudanum if it becomes unbearable," Brennan frowned. He did not like the idea of his wife in constant pain, but that was a problem to address later. For now, he needed to get her home. The ride to the ranch was slow and careful. Brennan avoided every rut and rock he could, constantly glancing back to check on Winifred. She spent most of the journey staring at the vast Kansas prairie stretching out in all directions, and he wondered what she thought of this land so different from St. Louis. "It is beautiful," she said suddenly, as if reading his thoughts. "I have never seen so much sky." "Wait until night," he replied. "The stars out here are something remarkable." When the ranch house came into view, Brennan felt a mixture of pride and anxiety. He had built it himself with help from Dutch and a few other hands. It was solid and well constructed, but it was also a bachelor's home, rough around the edges and lacking a woman's touch. "It is a fine house," Winifred said, and he could hear the sincerity in her voice. He stopped the wagon as close to the front porch as possible. Dutch had already arrived and was waiting respectfully by the barn. Brennan jumped down and went to lift Winifred from the wagon bed. "There is a tradition," she said as he gathered her in his arms again, "about carrying a bride over the threshold." "I am aware." He adjusted his grip, making sure she was secure. "I intend to honor it." He carried her up the 3 steps to the porch and paused at the front door. She reached down and turned the handle for him, and then he was stepping over the threshold, his wife in his arms, officially beginning their new life together. The interior of the house was clean, at least. Dutch's wife had come by the previous day to help him make it presentable. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. 2 doors led off to bedrooms, and another door opened to a small washroom he had added the previous year. Brennan carried Winifred to the bedroom he had prepared for them. He had wrestled with the decision of whether to prepare separate rooms, but something in him had rebelled at the idea. They were married. They would share a room, even if they did not yet share a bed in the fullest sense. He had brought in the most comfortable chair from the main room and positioned it near the window with a small table beside it. He lowered Winifred into the chair carefully, and she sighed with relief at being upright again. "Thank you," she said. "That is much better than lying down." "I have done too much of that lately." "I imagine so." He knelt beside her chair. "Listen, Winifred, I know this is all very strange and sudden. We are married, but we are also strangers. I do not expect anything from you tonight or any night until you are ready and willing. We will figure this out together at whatever pace you need." She reached out and touched his face gently, her fingers cool against his skin. "You are a good man, Brennan Masters. I hope I prove worthy of your kindness. You already have." He caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "Now you must be exhausted and hungry. Let me bring you something to eat and then you can rest." "I would like that very much." He left her to explore the room and went to prepare a simple meal. Dutch had left fresh bread, cold chicken, and cheese. Brennan arranged it on a plate and brought it back with a glass of cool water from the well. Winifred ate slowly, savoring each bite. "This is delicious. Did you prepare this?" Dutch's wife, Martha. "She has been helping me get ready for your arrival." He sat on the edge of the bed, watching her. "Speaking of which, we need to talk about practical matters. Such as how we are going to manage daily life. You said you could not cook standing at a stove, but what if the stove was lower? Or if we arranged the kitchen so you could reach everything while seated?" You mentioned you cannot clean, but that seems like something we could solve with the right tools and arrangement. Winifred set down her plate and looked at him with something like wonder. You have been thinking about this. Of course I have. For 2 weeks while I waited for you. He leaned forward. I will not pretend I have all the answers. This is new territory for both of us. But I am a builder and a problem solver by nature. If we work together, I believe we can find solutions. I do not want to be a burden. Then do not be one, be my partner. Help me figure this out. He reached over and took her hand. I meant what I said at the train station. I wanted a wife and a companion, someone to share my life with. That has not changed. She squeezed his hand and he saw tears threatening again. I am not usually this emotional. The accident, the pain, the uncertainty, it has all been rather overwhelming. I imagine it has. He stood and moved the plate to the bedside table. You should rest now. I have work to attend to, but I will check on you in a few hours. Brennan, she caught his sleeve as he turned to leave. Thank you for not sending me back. He bent and kissed her forehead. Thank you for still coming. The next few days established a routine of sorts. Brennan rose at dawn, helped Winifred dress and carried her to the chair in the main room where she could watch him work in the kitchen. She insisted on helping where she could, chopping vegetables at the table, kneading bread dough, giving him instructions for recipes she knew. Her presence transformed the house. She had brought books with her, which she arranged on shelves he quickly built. She had embroidered pillowcases and a tablecloth that brightened the rough furniture. Her voice, her laughter, her very presence made the place feel like a home rather than just a house. But Brennan also saw her frustration. She hated being dependent, hated needing to ask for help with the most basic tasks. He carried her everywhere, over every threshold, into every room, and while he never complained, he could see the shame it caused her. 1 week after her arrival, he came in from the barn to find her crying at the kitchen table. What is wrong? He rushed to her side. Are you in pain? I wanted to make you breakfast, she said through her tears. To surprise you. You do so much for me, and I wanted to do something for you. But I could not reach the pan on the hook, and I dropped the eggs trying to get them from the pantry. And now there is a mess, and I am utterly useless. Brennan looked at the broken eggs on the floor and then back at his wife. You are many things, Winifred Masters, but useless is not one of them. How can you say that? I cannot even make breakfast without creating disaster. He pulled out a chair and sat facing her. The pan was hung in the wrong place. The eggs were stored where you could not reach them. That is not your failure. That is mine for not thinking ahead. But no. He took both her hands in his. Listen to me. We have been approaching this all wrong. I have been trying to accommodate your chair, but what we really need to do is redesign the entire kitchen around your needs. Lower the work surfaces. Reorganize the storage. Make it so you can function independently. That would be a tremendous amount of work. I am a rancher. Work is what I do, he smiled at her. Besides, Dutch has been complaining about being bored. This will give him a project. You would do that for me. I would do anything for you. She pulled one hand free and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. I am falling in love with you, Brennan Masters. I did not expect to, so quickly and so completely, but I am. His heart soared. I have been in love with you since your first letter. When you wrote about how you believed kindness was the greatest virtue a person could possess, I knew you were the woman I wanted to spend my life with. He leaned forward and kissed her properly for the first time since their wedding day. She responded eagerly, her arms going around his neck, and for a long moment the broken eggs and all their challenges disappeared. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing heavily. Tonight, she whispered. I want you to carry me over the threshold of our bedroom tonight and not leave until morning. Are you certain? I have never been more certain of anything. That evening, after a supper they prepared together, with him following her instructions and her doing what she could from her seat at the table. Brennan lifted his wife and carried her to their bedroom. He undressed her carefully, seeing for the first time the full extent of her injuries, the bruises that had faded to yellow and green, the scars that would never fully disappear. "I am not whole," she said softly as he looked at her. "You are perfect." He began removing his own clothes. "And you are mine." Their wedding night, delayed by a week, was tender and sweet. Brennan was careful, constantly checking that he was not hurting her, and Winifred was patient with his concern. When they finally came together, it felt like the final piece of their marriage falling into place, the seal on the commitment they had made to each other. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his hand stroking her hair. "I was so afraid," she admitted, "that you would not want me, that this part of marriage would be impossible." "It was perfect," he assured her. "You are perfect." "I cannot feel my legs," she said quietly, "but I can feel everything else. I can feel your hands on me, your lips on mine. I can feel pleasure and desire and love. The accident took my ability to walk, but it did not take away my ability to be a wife to you in all ways." He held her tighter. "I love you, Winifred. I love you too." The next morning, Brennan and Dutch began the kitchen renovation. They lowered the work surface to a height that Winifred could reach comfortably while seated. They built a rolling cart that she could use to transport items. They reorganized all the storage to put everyday items within her reach. It took 3 days of intensive work, but when they finished, Winifred could navigate the kitchen independently. The first meal she prepared entirely by herself was a simple stew, but Brennan praised it as if it were a feast fit for kings. "You understand this is ordinary stew," she said, laughing at his enthusiasm. "This is the first meal my wife made for me in our home. It is extraordinary." She reached up from her chair and pulled him down for a kiss. "You are ridiculous and wonderful." Life settled into a new rhythm. Winifred took over the household management, not just cooking but also mending clothes, keeping accounts and planning improvements to the house. She could not go outside easily, the rough ground making it impossible for her to propel her chair, but Brennan made sure to carry her out every evening to watch the sunset. True to his word, the stars at night were spectacular. They would sit together on the porch, Winifred in her chair and Brennan on the steps beside her, and watch the vast canvas of the sky. "I never knew the world could be so beautiful and so quiet," she said one night in October. "In St. Louis, there was always noise, always people. Here, there is just us and the prairie and the sky. Do you miss the city?" "Not even a little bit." She reached down and ran her fingers through his hair. "I have everything I need right here." But Brennan knew she was still limited in ways that bothered her. She could not attend church services because the church had steps and no ramp. She could not socialize with the other ranch wives because visiting meant traveling over rough roads. She was isolated in a way he knew must be difficult for someone as naturally social as her. In November, he made a decision. He spent 2 weeks building a special carriage, one with a low floor and a ramp that could be positioned to allow Winifred to roll her chair directly inside. It had large wheels that could handle rough terrain and a covered top to protect her from the elements. When he showed it to her, she burst into tears. "Now you can go anywhere," he said. "Town, church, visiting neighbors. You are not trapped here anymore." "How did I get so lucky?" she asked through her tears. "I ask myself the same question every day." That Sunday, they attended church together. The Reverend welcomed them warmly, and several ranch wives approached Winifred after the service, inviting her to join their sewing circle. Brennan watched his wife blossom under the attention, her natural friendliness and charm winning people over immediately. On the way home, she was more animated than he had ever seen her. Martha invited me to visit on Wednesday, and Clara wants to teach me her recipe for apple pie. And did you hear about the Thanksgiving social? Everyone is invited and I can help with the planning. She paused and looked at him. I have not felt this normal since the accident. You are normal, he said firmly. Different is not abnormal, I know, but it is nice to feel included again. Thanksgiving arrived cold and clear. The social was held in the church hall, and Brennan carried Winifred over the threshold while other men brought in covered dishes and desserts. The evening was filled with music, food, and laughter. Winifred sat at a table with the other women, gossiping and giggling like she had known them for years rather than weeks. Brennan stood with the men, accepting their congratulations on his marriage. "You are a good man, Masters," Dutch said quietly. "Not many would have done what you did." "I did not do anything special. I married the woman I fell in love with. Still, you gave her a life when most men would have sent her packing." Brennan looked across the room at his wife, watching her laugh at something Clara had said. "I am the lucky one. She gave me far more than I gave her." That night, as they lay in bed together, Winifred curled against his side, she said, "I am happy. Truly, completely happy. I never thought I would feel this way again after the accident, but you have given me a life beyond my wildest dreams." "We gave each other a life," he corrected. "I was lonely before you came. This house was just a building. You made it a home." Winter came early that year. By mid-December, snow covered the prairie, transforming the landscape into a wonderland of white. Brennan made sure the house was well stocked with firewood and supplies, knowing they might be snowed in for days at a time. Winifred did not mind. She sat by the fire, sewing or reading, perfectly content. In the evenings, Brennan would read aloud to her from the newspaper or one of her books, and they would talk for hours about everything and nothing. One evening in January, she set down her sewing and said, "I am late." Brennan looked up from the harness he was mending. "Late for what?" "My monthly courses. I am 3 weeks late." Understanding dawned slowly, followed by a surge of joy and concern. "You think you might be pregnant?" "I think I am definitely pregnant." She looked at him with a mixture of excitement and fear. "The doctor said the accident would not prevent me from having children, but he also warned that pregnancy and childbirth would be more difficult for me." Brennan set aside his work and moved to kneel beside her chair. "How do you feel about this?" Terrified, thrilled, both at once. She took his hands. "I want your child, Brennan. I want to give you a family, but I am frightened of what might happen. Then we will face it together, just like we face everything else." He kissed her gently. "And we will talk to the doctor, make sure we know what to expect and how to prepare." The next time the weather cleared enough for travel, they went into Hayes City to see Dr. Harrison. The doctor examined Winifred carefully and confirmed her pregnancy. "Your spine injury will not affect the pregnancy itself," he explained, "but childbirth will be challenging. You will not be able to push effectively, which means we may need to use forceps or other interventions. There is also an increased risk of complications." "What kind of complications?" Brennan asked, his hand tight in Winifred's. "Excessive bleeding, infection, and difficulties with the delivery itself. I will not lie to you, Mrs. Masters. This will be dangerous. I recommend you stay in town for the final month of your pregnancy so I can monitor you closely." Winifred lifted her chin. "I survived being run down by a drunken carriage driver and having my spine nearly severed. I can survive childbirth." "I have no doubt of your courage," the doctor said gently. "But courage alone may not be enough. Please, consider my recommendation." On the ride home, they were both quiet. Finally, Brennan said, "I do not want you to do this if it puts your life at risk." "Are you saying you do not want this child?" I am saying I want you more than I want a child. If I have to choose between you and a baby, I choose you. Every time." She reached over and took his hand. "I understand your fear because I share it. But I want this, Brennan. I want to give you a son or daughter. I want to be a mother. Please do not ask me to give up that dream." "I would never ask that of you." He brought her hand to his lips. "I will support whatever you decide. But I will also worry every single day until you are safely delivered. That is your prerogative as a husband and father." As the pregnancy progressed, Brennan became increasingly protective. He carried her everywhere, even when she insisted she could propel her own chair. He worried about her diet, her rest, her comfort. Winifred tolerated his hovering with good humor, understanding it came from love. She had some difficult days, particularly in the early months when nausea plagued her. But as she moved into the second trimester, she began to bloom. Her skin glowed, her hair became thick and lustrous, and her joy at the life growing inside her was evident to everyone who saw her. The ranch wives rallied around her, bringing baby clothes and advice. Martha and Clara came by frequently, helping with heavier chores and keeping Winifred company. The isolation she had feared never materialized because the community had embraced her completely. In June, when Winifred was 7 months along, they moved into a boarding house in Hays City so Dr. Harrison could monitor her closely. Brennan left Dutch in charge of the ranch and took a room at the boarding house, refusing to be separated from his wife. "You should go home," Winifred told him one evening. "The ranch needs you. You need me more." He sat on the bed beside her chair, his hand resting on her swollen belly. "Besides, I am not missing a moment of this. I want to feel every kick, every movement." As if on cue, the baby kicked strongly against his palm. Brennan grinned. "There is our little fighter. He or she definitely takes after you in stubbornness." The baby came 3 weeks early on a sweltering July afternoon. Winifred's labor started suddenly, and Brennan ran for the doctor in a panic. Dr. Harrison arrived quickly and took charge, sending Brennan to fetch the midwife who assisted with difficult births. The labor was long and arduous. Brennan stayed by Winifred's side through all of it, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths and murmuring encouragement. She could not push effectively, just as the doctor had warned, and as the hours dragged on, Brennan saw her strength fading. "I cannot do this," she gasped at one point. "I am too tired." "Yes, you can." He leaned close, his forehead touching hers. "You are the strongest person I know. You survived the accident. You survived the journey here. You survived learning to live a completely new life. You can survive this." "I am frightened." "I know. So am I. But we are in this together, remember. You and me against the world." She gripped his hand so tightly he thought his bones might break, but he did not pull away. Finally, after 18 hours of labor, Dr. Harrison used forceps to guide the baby out. The moment Brennan heard his child's first cry, he felt tears streaming down his face. "A boy," the midwife announced, wrapping the squalling infant in a blanket. A healthy, strong boy. But Brennan was focused on Winifred. She had gone pale, too pale, and blood was soaking the sheets beneath her. "Doc," he said urgently, "I see it." Dr. Harrison was already working, his hands moving quickly. "Mrs. Masters, stay with me now." Winifred's eyes fluttered closed. "Winifred," Brennan grabbed her hand. "Look at me. Look at our son. You fought too hard to give up now." Her eyes opened slightly. "Let me see him." The midwife brought the baby over, and Brennan helped Winifred hold their son for the first time. The infant had stopped crying and was looking up at his mother with dark blue eyes. "Hello, little one," Winifred whispered. "I am your mama." "She needs to rest now," Dr. Harrison said firmly. "The bleeding is slowing, but she is not out of danger yet." Brennan took his son while the midwife helped settle Winifred into bed. The baby was so small, so perfect, with a cap of dark hair and tiny fingers that gripped Brennan's thumb with surprising strength. "You are going to be fine," he told Winifred, trying to convince himself as much as her. "You hear me? You are going to be fine." The next 24 hours were the longest of Brennan's life. Winifred drifted in and out of consciousness, weakened by blood loss. Dr. Harrison stayed close, monitoring her constantly. Brennan divided his time between sitting at his wife's bedside and caring for their newborn son, who proved to have healthy lungs and a hearty appetite. On the second day, Winifred woke fully and asked for water. Brennan helped her drink, then brought the baby to her. "He needs a name," she said, her voice weak but steady. "I have been thinking. What about Benjamin?" "Benjamin Joseph Masters," she smiled. "Benjamin, little Benjamin, it is perfect." Over the next week, Winifred slowly regained her strength. The bleeding stopped and her color returned. Brennan brought her meals and helped her care for Benjamin, marveling at how natural she was with their son despite having no experience with babies. "Motherhood suits you," he told her one evening as she nursed Benjamin. "I am not doing anything special, just following instinct." "You are doing everything right," he kissed her forehead. "I am so proud of you." When Dr. Harrison finally cleared them to go home, Brennan arranged everything carefully. He had built a special cradle that could be secured to Winifred's chair, so she could keep Benjamin close while still being mobile. He packed their belongings and drove them home slowly, conscious of his precious cargo. Carrying Winifred and Benjamin over the threshold of their ranch house felt like coming full circle. They had started their marriage with him carrying her into an uncertain future. Now he was carrying her and their son into a future filled with love and possibility. Life with a newborn was exhausting but joyful. Benjamin was a good baby, alert and curious about the world around him. Winifred managed motherhood and her disability with characteristic determination, finding ways to care for her son despite her limitations. Brennan helped with everything, changing diapers, walking the floor with a crying baby in the middle of the night, and supporting Winifred when exhaustion overwhelmed her. They worked as a team, just as they always had. As Benjamin grew, the ranch prospered. Brennan's careful management and hard work paid off, and they were able to hire another ranch hand, which freed up more of Brennan's time to spend with his family. The house rang with Benjamin's laughter, and Winifred bloomed in her role as mother. One evening when Benjamin was 6 months old, Winifred said, "I want another baby." Brennan looked up from where he was playing with Benjamin on the floor. "Are you certain? The doctor said it would always be dangerous for you." "I know the risks. But I also know that I want Benjamin to have a sibling. I want a larger family." She wheeled over to where he sat. "I am not afraid anymore. I know you will be there with me just like you were before." "Always," he promised. "Through everything, always." Their daughter, Anne Catherine Masters, was born 2 years later. The labor was shorter but no less intense, and once again Brennan stayed by Winifred's side through every moment. When he held his daughter for the first time, looking at her tiny perfect face, he felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. Benjamin, now a rambunctious toddler, was fascinated by his baby sister. He would sit beside Winifred's chair and try to help with everything, from fetching diapers to singing lullabies in his sweet, off-key voice. The years passed in a blur of happy chaos. Benjamin started school and proved to be bright and eager to learn. Anne grew into a cheerful, adventurous little girl who kept her parents constantly on their toes. The ranch continued to thrive, becoming one of the most successful in the area. Winifred became a pillar of the community. She organized fundraisers for the church, taught other women to sew and embroider, and mentored young wives struggling with the challenges of frontier life. Her disability had long since stopped being something people noticed. She was simply Mrs. Masters, respected and beloved by everyone who knew her. Brennan still carried her over every threshold, even after 15 years of marriage. It had become their tradition, a physical reminder of the commitment they had made to each other that day on the train platform. "You do not have to keep doing this," she would tell him, laughing as he swept her into his arms. "I know, I want to." On their 15th anniversary, they threw a party at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from miles around to celebrate. The house and barn were decorated with bunting and flowers. Tables groaned under the weight of food. Music and laughter filled the air. Brennan stood on the porch, watching Winifred hold court from her chair, surrounded by friends. Benjamin and Anne were playing with the other children, their shouts of joy carrying across the yard. Dutch was telling exaggerated stories to a group of younger ranch hands. Martha and Clara were fussing over the dessert table. This was his life. This beautiful, chaotic, perfect life. Winifred caught his eye and smiled, that same smile that had captivated him when she first looked up at him from her wheelchair all those years ago. He walked over to her and held out his hand. "Dance with me," he said. "I cannot dance. Neither can I, really. But we can sway together, and that is close enough." He lifted her from her chair and held her close, turning in slow circles while someone played a fiddle. Her arms were around his neck, her head on his shoulder, and Brennan thought about how close he had come to sending her back to St. Louis that day. "What are you thinking about?" she murmured. "About how you changed my life, about how grateful I am that you were brave enough to come here despite everything. I think we changed each other's lives." She pulled back to look at him. "You gave me back my future when I thought the accident had stolen it. You showed me that my worth was not defined by what I could or could not do physically. You taught me what real strength looks like, what courage and grace and determination can accomplish." He kissed her softly. "I love you more now than I did on the day we married, and I loved you quite a lot even then. I love you too, forever and always." As the sun set over the Kansas prairie, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Brennan held his wife and watched their children play. The challenges they had faced seemed small now, distant memories of a time when they were still learning to be partners. They had built something beautiful together, something that went beyond a successful ranch or even a happy family. They had built a life of mutual respect, unwavering support, and profound love. They had proven that commitment and creativity could overcome any obstacle, that disability did not mean inability, and that true partnership meant facing every challenge together. That night, after the guests had gone home and the children were asleep, Brennan carried Winifred over the threshold of their bedroom one more time. She laughed at the familiar routine, but there was love and contentment in her eyes. "Every threshold," she said. "All these years, and you have carried me over every single one. That was the promise I made to myself the day you arrived. No matter what challenges we faced, I would carry you through them, literally and figuratively. And I promised myself I would be worthy of that devotion." She touched his face tenderly. "I hope I have been. You have exceeded every hope and dream I ever had." He laid her on their bed and settled beside her. "You are my partner, my best friend, the love of my life, and the mother of my children. You are everything." They lay together in comfortable silence, listening to the familiar sounds of their home settling for the night. In the next room, they could hear Benjamin's soft snoring and Anne's occasional sleep murmur. Outside, the cattle lowed gently, and the prairie wind whispered through the grass. "Do you ever regret it?" Winifred asked quietly. "Choosing me, taking on all the extra work and challenges that came with my disability?" Brennan propped himself up on one elbow to look down at her. "Not for a single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Winifred Masters. Every challenge we faced was worth it. Every accommodation we made, every solution we found together, all of it led us to this life we have built. I would not change a thing. Not even on the hard days. Especially not on the hard days. Those were the days that taught us how strong we could be together." She pulled him down for a kiss, pouring all her love and gratitude into it. When they finally parted, both were smiling. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For seeing past my wheelchair. For seeing me. I will always see you. All of you. The brilliant, beautiful, strong, stubborn woman I fell in love with through letters and fell deeper in love with every day since." They made love slowly, tenderly, with the practiced ease of two people who knew each other's bodies intimately. Afterward, Winifred fell asleep in Brennan's arms, safe and loved and home. Brennan lay awake a little longer, thinking about the telegram that had arrived 16 years ago announcing unforeseen circumstances. Those 2 words had filled him with dread at the time, but they had turned out to be the beginning of the greatest adventure of his life. He thought about the woman he had found at the train station, frightened and vulnerable, offering to return to St. Louis rather than burden him. He thought about all the thresholds he had carried her over since then, each one a recommitment to their partnership. He thought about their children, the life they had built, the community they were part of. Most of all, he thought about how lucky he was. Some men might have seen Winifred's disability as a burden or limitation. Brennan had seen it as just another detail, no more defining than her hair color or her height. What mattered was her heart, her mind, her spirit. What mattered was the love that had grown between them, nurtured by mutual respect and unwavering support. The next morning, Brennan woke early as always. He dressed quietly, then lifted Winifred from their bed and carried her to her chair, which he had positioned near the wardrobe. It was their morning routine, so familiar now that they barely spoke during it. "Thank you," she murmured, still half asleep. "Always." He kissed the top of her head and went to start breakfast. By the time Winifred wheeled into the kitchen, dressed and ready for the day, the coffee was hot and bacon was sizzling in the pan. Benjamin thundered down the stairs moments later, full of energy despite the early hour. "Papa, can we go fishing today? You said maybe we could go fishing." "After chores," Brennan agreed, "and if your mother can spare us." "I think I can manage without you two for a few hours," Winifred said with a smile. "Anne and I will have a girls' day." "Right, sweetheart," Anne, who had followed her brother downstairs more sedately, nodded enthusiastically. "Can we make cookies, Mama?" "We absolutely can." After breakfast, Brennan carried Winifred over the threshold to the porch so she could enjoy the morning air while he did his chores. It was a beautiful September day, clear and mild, with just a hint of autumn in the breeze. As he worked, checking on the cattle and mending a section of fence, Brennan found himself reflecting on how perfectly ordinary his extraordinary life had become. The accommodations they had made for Winifred's disability were so integrated into their daily routine that he barely thought about them anymore. The kitchen designed for her reach, the ramps he had built at various points around the property, the special carriage that allowed her to travel. All of it was just part of their life, as natural as breathing. Benjamin chattered beside him as they worked, asking endless questions about everything from why cows had 4 stomachs to how fish breathed underwater. Brennan answered patiently, remembering his own father doing the same for him years ago. "Papa," Benjamin asked as they walked to the creek with their fishing poles, "why does Mama use a chair with wheels?" It was not the first time one of the children had asked about Winifred's disability, but Benjamin was at an age where he was starting to notice that his mother was different from other mothers. Your mama was hurt in an accident before she came to Kansas, Brennan explained. The accident damaged her spine, which made it so she could not walk anymore. The chair helps her get around. Does it hurt? Sometimes. But your mama is very strong and she does not let the pain stop her from living her life. Benjamin thought about this as he baited his hook. Jimmy at school said his pa said that mama is broken. Brennan felt anger flash through him, but he kept his voice calm. Your mama is not broken. She is different from some people, but different is not broken. You understand that? I think so. Benjamin cast his line into the creek. I think Mama is perfect. So do I, son. So do I. That evening, as the family gathered for supper, Brennan looked around the table at his wife and children and felt a surge of contentment so strong it almost hurt. This was what he had dreamed of all those years ago when he had first decided to seek a mail-order bride. A family, a home filled with love and laughter, a partner to share life with. He had gotten all that and so much more. After the children were in bed, Brennan and Winifred sat on the porch as they did most evenings. He had carried her out and settled her chair beside his favorite spot on the steps. The stars were brilliant overhead, just as they had been on her first night at the ranch. Benjamin asked me today why you use a wheelchair, Brennan said. Winifred nodded. Anne asked me something similar last week. I suppose they are at an age where they are noticing these things. How do you want to handle it? With honesty. They should know about the accident, about how life sometimes throws unexpected challenges at us. But they should also know that challenges do not define us. She reached down and took his hand. We have shown them that, I think, by living our lives fully despite the obstacles. You have shown them that. You are the strongest person I know, Winifred. I am only strong because I have you beside me. Your support, your love, your unwavering belief in me, that is what gave me the courage to rebuild my life after the accident. We built this life together. Yes, she agreed. Together, always together. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars and listening to the night sounds of the prairie. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote howled. Closer to the house, the cattle settled for the night. The wind whispered through the grass with its endless, ageless song. You remember what I said to you the day we met? Brennan asked. At the train station, you said many things. Which part specifically? I told you that what attracted me to you was your mind and your heart, not your ability to walk. I meant it then, and I mean it now. You could have been born without legs, and I would have fallen in love with you just the same. Winifred squeezed his hand. I know. That is why I fell in love with you, because you saw me as a whole person, not just a woman in a wheelchair. You saw my potential, my worth, my humanity. You gave me back my dignity when I thought the accident had taken it forever. You never lost your dignity. You just needed someone to help you see it, she laughed softly. Always so wise, my cowboy husband, not wise, just in love. They stayed outside until the night grew cold, then Brennan carried Winifred inside over the threshold into their bedroom. As he helped her prepare for bed, they moved with the synchronized efficiency of long practice. He had learned exactly how to help her undress without making her feel helpless. She had learned to accept his assistance without feeling diminished. It was a dance they had perfected over 16 years, this balance between independence and interdependence, between capability and care. In bed, Winifred curled against Brennan's side, her head on his chest, and sighed contentedly. I have been thinking, she said, about how different my life would have been if that carriage had not hit me. I would have come here able-bodied. We would have married and built a life together. But would it have been this life? Would we have been this close, this united? Brennan considered the question. I like to think we would have found our way to this kind of partnership regardless. But I understand what you mean. The challenges we faced together, the problem-solving we did, the constant communication required to make our life work. All of that forged a bond that might have taken much longer to develop under normal circumstances. Exactly. She traced patterns on his chest with one finger. So in a strange way, I am grateful for the accident. Not for the pain or the loss of my ability to walk, but for how it shaped our marriage. We had to be intentional about everything. We could not take anything for granted. We had to actively choose each other, every single day. I would choose you every day, accident or no accident. I know. And I would choose you. She kissed his chest. My faithful cowboy who has carried me over every threshold. Years continued to pass in their peaceful rhythm. Benjamin grew into a strong, thoughtful young man who went off to university in Lawrence to study engineering. Anne became a teacher, taking over the small schoolhouse in Hayes City. Both children married and started families of their own, bringing grandchildren to visit the ranch regularly. Brennan and Winifred aged together, their love deepening with each passing year. His hair turned silver, and her face gained lines of laughter and wisdom. His strength endured, and he continued to carry her over every threshold, even as they both grew older. On their 30th anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. The house and barn had been expanded over the years to accommodate the growing family. The ranch itself had grown as well, one of the most prosperous in the county. During the party, Benjamin stood up to make a toast. He was 30 years old now, a successful engineer with a wife and 2 children of his own. I want to thank my parents, he said, raising his glass, for showing me what real love looks like. For teaching me that challenges are just opportunities for creative solutions, for demonstrating that commitment means being willing to carry your partner through anything. He looked directly at Brennan. Papa, you have literally carried Mama over every threshold for 3 decades. But you have also carried her emotionally, supporting her dreams and helping her achieve things everyone said were impossible. That is the kind of husband and father I aspire to be. Anne stood next. Mama, you taught me that strength comes in many forms, that determination and grace can coexist. That limitations are often just our own imagination. You never let your wheelchair define you or stop you from living fully. You are my hero. Winifred was crying openly now, and Brennan handed her his handkerchief, just as he had done on that first day at the train station 30 years ago. We are just 2 people who love each other, Winifred said when she could speak. We faced our challenges together and built a beautiful life. That is all. That is everything, Brennan corrected gently. That night, alone in their bedroom after everyone had left, Brennan undressed his wife slowly, reverently. Their lovemaking had changed over the years, becoming gentler but no less passionate. They knew each other's bodies intimately, knew exactly how to bring pleasure and joy. Afterward, as they lay together in the darkness, Winifred said, I would not change anything. Not one single moment of our life together, neither would I. Even when I am difficult, when my pain makes me short-tempered, even then. Especially then, because those are the moments when you need me most. He kissed her forehead. In sickness and in health, remember, for better or worse. I meant those vows, Winifred. So did I. She was quiet for a moment, then added, I worry sometimes about the future. About what will happen when we are too old for you to carry me anymore. Then I will get a younger, stronger man to do the carrying, and I will walk beside you and hold your hand. We will figure it out, just like we have figured out everything else. Always together, always together. As they drifted off to sleep, Brennan thought about the scared woman he had met at the train station 3 decades ago. She had been so certain that her disability made her unworthy of love, so convinced that no man would want a wife who could not walk. He had proven her wrong every single day since then. Their life together had not been without challenges. There had been difficult times, painful moments, frustrations, and setbacks. But there had been infinitely more joy, laughter, love, and triumph. They had raised two wonderful children. They had built a successful ranch. They had created a home filled with warmth and happiness. Most importantly, they had loved each other through it all. As Brennan aged into his 50s and then 60s, his strength remained remarkable. He still carried Winifred everywhere she needed to go, still lifted her over every threshold without complaint. It had become such an integral part of their relationship that neither could imagine it any other way. The community they were part of had long since forgotten to see Winifred's wheelchair first. She was simply Winifred Masters, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and friend. She was the woman who organized church fundraisers, taught young girls to sew, and always had wise advice for anyone who asked. Her disability was just one small part of who she was, no more defining than the color of her eyes or her talent for baking apple pie. On their 40th anniversary, Brennan carried Winifred over the threshold of their bedroom and set her gently in her chair. She caught his face in her hands and looked at him with eyes still as gray and beautiful as they had been 4 decades ago. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For everything. For seeing me when everyone else only saw a wheelchair. For building a life around my needs without making me feel like a burden. For carrying me over every threshold, literally and figuratively. For loving me so completely that I never felt less than whole." Brennan knelt beside her chair, bringing himself to her level as he had done so many times over the years. "You have never been less than whole. You are the most complete person I know. You have a capacity for love and joy that humbles me daily. Thank you for agreeing to come to Kansas all those years ago. Thank you for giving me a chance despite your fears. Thank you for building this beautiful life with me." They kissed, a slow, tender kiss that held 4 decades of love, partnership, and unwavering devotion. That night, as they lay in bed together, Winifred said, "I used to think the accident was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Now I wonder if it was actually a blessing in disguise. It brought me to you, to this life, to everything I hold dear." "The accident was not a blessing," Brennan said firmly. "It was a tragedy that caused you pain and took away your ability to walk. But what we built together, despite that tragedy, that is the blessing. We took something terrible and refused to let it define us. We created beauty and love and happiness in spite of it. You are right, as always." She snuggled closer to him. "I love you, Brennan Masters, today, tomorrow, and forever. I love you too, Winifred Masters, more than words can express." They fell asleep in each other's arms, two souls so intertwined that they moved as one. The years continued their march. Brennan and Winifred celebrated their 50th anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The ranch had been passed down to Benjamin, who ran it with the same care and dedication his father had shown. Brennan was 76 now, his hair white, his face deeply lined. But his arms were still strong enough to carry his beloved wife, and he did so daily, over every threshold, keeping the promise he had made to himself half a century ago. Winifred was 73, her auburn hair now silver, her body frail from decades of limited mobility. But her mind was sharp, her humor intact, and her love for her husband as fierce as it had been on their wedding day. One evening in late autumn, as Brennan carried her out to the porch to watch the sunset, Winifred said, "This is my favorite time of day. When the sky turns gold and pink, and the world gets quiet, and it is just you and me. Mine too." He settled her in her chair and took his customary place on the steps beside her, They watched the sun sink below the horizon, painting the Kansas prairie in brilliant hues. The cattle lowed softly in the distance. A hawk circled overhead, riding the evening thermals. The wind whispered its eternal song through the grass. "You remember the first night we sat out here together?" Winifred asked. "You told me the stars were spectacular. They still are." Brennan pointed upward as the first stars began to appear. "Look, there is Venus. I see it." She reached down and took his hand. "Thank you for showing me the stars, Brennan, for showing me that life could still be beautiful and full and worth living, even after the accident took so much from me. You showed me that real strength has nothing to do with physical ability. You taught me that love is not about perfection, but about choosing each other, every single day through every challenge." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You made me a better man. And you made me whole again." They sat together as darkness fell and the stars emerged in their billions, a vast canopy of light stretching from horizon to horizon. After all these years, after all the challenges they had faced and overcome, they were still here, still together, still in love. Brennan thought about the telegram that had arrived 52 years ago, announcing unforeseen circumstances. He thought about the woman he had found at the train station, frightened and vulnerable, offering to return to St. Louis rather than burden him. He thought about the decision he had made in that moment to see past the wheelchair to the woman in it. It was the best decision he had ever made. "Come," he said finally, standing and moving to lift her. "It is getting cold. Let me take you inside." "Over the threshold?" she asked with a smile. "Over every threshold, always and forever." He carried her into their home, over the threshold they had crossed together thousands of times. Inside, the house was warm and welcoming, filled with memories of a life well lived and a love that had endured through everything. Brennan set Winifred in her chair near the fireplace and went to stoke the fire. As the flames caught and grew, casting dancing shadows on the walls, he looked at his wife and felt his heart swell with gratitude. They had built something beautiful together, something that transcended disability, challenge, or hardship. They had proven that real love was not about perfection, but about commitment, creativity, and unwavering devotion. They had shown their children and grandchildren what true partnership looked like. Most importantly, they had lived fully, loved deeply, and faced every challenge together. As Brennan settled into his chair beside Winifred, she reached over and took his hand. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the fire and listening to the familiar sounds of their home. Outside, the wind continued its eternal song across the prairie. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. The world turned, as it always had and always would. But inside this house, in this moment, there was only love. Winifred leaned her head against Brennan's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. They had crossed so many thresholds together, faced so many challenges, overcome so many obstacles. And through it all, their love had not just endured, but had grown stronger, deeper, more profound. "I love you," Winifred whispered. "I love you too," Brennan replied. "Today, tomorrow, and forever, over every threshold until the end of time." And as the fire crackled and the night deepened around them, Brennan and Winifred Masters sat together, two souls united by love, commitment, and the conscious choice they had made every single day for more than half a century, to face life together, to support each other through anything, and to never, ever give up on the beautiful life they had built. They had started their journey together on a train platform in Hays City, Kansas, in September 1878. One man, one woman, and a wheelchair that could have been an insurmountable obstacle, but instead became just another detail in their extraordinary love story. Brennan had carried Winifred over every threshold, both literal and metaphorical, for 52 years. He would continue to do so for as long as he had strength in his body and breath in his lungs. It was not a burden or an obligation. It was a privilege, an honor, and a daily recommitment to the love that had transformed both their lives. As they sat together by the fire, holding hands and watching the flames dance, they knew with absolute certainty that they had lived well, loved well, and built something that would endure long after they were gone. Their children and grandchildren would carry forward the lessons they had learned, the values they had exemplified, and the proof that real love could overcome anything. The mail-order bride who had arrived crippled from an accident, frightened and uncertain, had become the beloved matriarch of a large, loving family. The lonely cowboy who had taken a chance on love, despite unexpected circumstances, had become the devoted husband and father whose strength and commitment had become legendary. Together, they had proven that disability did not mean inability, that challenges were opportunities in disguise, and that true love was not about finding a perfect person, but about choosing to see the perfection in an imperfect world. As the night deepened and the fire burned low, Brennan carried Winifred over one final threshold for the day, into their bedroom where they had shared 52 years of intimacy, conversation, laughter, and love. He helped her prepare for bed with the tender care he had shown since their first night together, and they settled into their familiar positions, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. "Good night, my love," she whispered. "Good night, my darling," he replied. "Sweet dreams." They fell asleep together as they had done thousands of times before, two hearts beating in rhythm, two souls united by love, two lives made complete by each other. Outside, the Kansas prairie stretched away into darkness, the stars wheeled overhead, and the wind sang its eternal song. And inside a small ranch house outside Hays City, Kansas, a cowboy and his mail-order bride, united by chance and bound by love, rested peacefully in each other's arms, having lived a life beyond their wildest dreams, all because they had chosen to see past obstacles to the possibilities beyond, and because one man had made a promise to himself to carry his wife over every threshold, no matter what challenges they faced. It was a promise he had kept faithfully for 52 years, and would continue to keep for all the days remaining to them, a testament to the power of love, commitment, and the simple choice to face life together, hand in hand, heart to heart, over every threshold, forever and always.